Hi guys, my name is Crystal Bianca and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to do my first book review ever, and my review is going to be on The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I hopped on the bandwagon a bit late with this series. I did finish the first two books last year and then I picked up this book this year. And I read this book a bit differently to the other two books. This book I read much slower. I didn't read it all at once, I read a little bit at a time. I think the way I read a book really makes a difference. When I read a book slower, I sort of have time to digest the plot and to think about the book much more. Okay, I'm just going to start by saying that Holly Black is an amazing writer. Like, her technique, she's been writing for years, she's a famous, successful author, and she writes good books. There's nothing wrong with her writing style or the writing mechanics or anything like that. I'm going to be talking more about plot and characters and their development within the story and whether they feel real to me or not, or whether I became attached to these characters or this plot and whether I liked it. So I'm just going to warn you that if I get any of these names wrong, I'm really sorry. I have a bad habit of mispronouncing names all the time. I read one thing and I have this name in my head and it's not the actual name, but I will try and pronounce the names as best as I can. The first thing that got me reading the Fog of the Air series was the book covers. The book covers and the titles, they're absolutely beautiful. I love them and I was immediately drawn to them. I think that I'm a bit of a completionist, so if I have one book, I need to read the next book and the next book, even if I haven't attached myself that much to the characters or the plot. All of the books I read quite slowly. This one I probably read the slowest. I think that's probably why I have trouble with attaching myself to the plot and the characters. So at the end of the last book, The Wicked King, Jude is exiled to the human world, and I got spoiled because I read this book late. There was a lot of stuff on social media and yeah, I was a bit annoyed because I'm like, I'm reading this book and I already know what's going to happen. I really hate when I get spoiled. But I knew that at the end of the book they couldn't just leave it that way because it just doesn't suit the style of the book to keep Jude in the human world. Something had to happen for Jude to go back to Elfheim. I'm heading into the spoilery section, so if you have not yet read the book, click onto one of my other videos now or click out of this video because I hate spoilers and I'd hate for you to be spoiled too. So let's get right into it. So let's start with my first problem with this book. When Jude gets into the human world, she immediately finds herself with fairies. Surprise, surprise. She gets a job where she has to go on and she has to kill a fairy that's killing humans. And I guess I didn't expect Jude to get a human job. That's completely out of character. But even this job seems a bit out of place with the plot. And this is when Jude meets Grimer Mogg. Okay, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Okay. And when she meets his character, so this character is the Grand General of the Court of Teeth, and when she meets his character, she's sort of described as some sort of like wild, dangerous creature. Like, this is not someone that Jude wants to mess with or is strong enough to mess with. And later on in the book, this character completely changes, and I get really annoyed when that happens because it feels completely unrealistic. When Jude gets home from defeating Grimer Mogg in their little knife fight that somehow Jude won, her sister Taryn turns up and she tells Jude that she needs Jude to go back into the fairy world to pose as her because she killed her husband Locke, and she's having an inquest and Jude can lie and she can beat Glamours, so that's why she wants Jude to take her place. You know what, I got really excited in this bit because I'm like, yes, Jude's finally going back. This story can take a really interesting turn. I was really excited to see how this would play out with Jude trying to act like Tarn, and whether people would believe her, and what things would be like between Carden and Jude playing Tarn. And I was disappointed. I think I was so disappointed because Jude doesn't stay like Tarn for long. She hardly spends any time with Carden. It's not long before she's kidnapped and taken by Maddox. And I feel like this story could have gone somewhere else. It could have just... I would have liked to have spent more time with Jude as Tarn. I think that would have done really cool things for the story. Jude ends up getting kidnapped by Maddox, and then she has to pretend that she's Tarn, I don't know, until she can find an escape. It isn't long before Maddox finds out that it's actually Jude, and then he battles her in a sword battle. And in this battle, he ends up defeating her, which is pretty realistic. And because she's the queen of Elfhame, the earth actually heals her. And I really like that bit. I like the idea of the vines coming up and going over her wound and actually healing her. And Jude is quick to make her way back to the palace because apparently the ghost is trying to kill Cardan. It turns out that the ghost wasn't after Cardan at all, and Jude sneaks into the palace and she ends up falling on the banquet table and everyone calls her a traitor. And this is when the good bit comes. I really like this scene. So, I think it's on page 147. I feel a guard's hand close on my arm. Then Cardan's voice comes. Do not touch her. A terrible silence follows. I wait for him to pronounce judgment on me. Whatever he commands will be done. His power is absolute. I don't even have the strength to fight back. Whatever can you mean? Randallin says. She is my wife, Cardan says, his voice carrying over the crowd. The rightful High Queen of Elfhame, and most definitely not in exile. And I got really excited with this bit because this is the first time that they announced publicly that yes, Jude is the queen and she's mine. Like it's great. I really love this bit. Then after this bit, we move on to book 2, and I really like the way that they do the gaps between the books. They have a beautiful illustration. I love that. I love when there's breaks between the writing, and then they put a poem at the beginning of the parts of the book. Jude has to take her place as queen, and her and Cardan have to work together to figure out how to stop Maddox, because Maddox wants to... Maddox. Why am I calling him Maddox? Maddox wants to take over the kingdom. Next, Jude and Cardan have their cute little scene together. I feel like in the last book, their scene together, like the romance elements were really lacking and rushed. And in this book, they're a bit better. Because I hate when romance, it's just skipped over because the main plot's more important. And I feel like that this didn't happen as much in this book as it has happened in the previous books in this series. Instead of going to war with Maddox, Cardan takes things into his own hands. And I hate what happens next. Like, this was probably my first huge shock of the book. Cardan ends up breaking the blood crown and saying that he wants to be a different ruler and he wants to be the High King because people have chosen him to be the High King. When this happens and he breaks the crown, the curse on the crown turns Cardan into a serpent. And, like, this is the first time I realised how much I loved Cardan's character. In the other books, I was so unsure about him. Like, I was like, I think I like him, but I'm not really that sure. But once we got to this scene, I'm like, oh my god, Cardan, what did you do? Now they're stuck with a huge-ass serpent, and Jude has no friggin' idea what to do. And I think that Jude's character growth really comes about after this, when Jude has to try and decide what the hell to do with Cardan, what to do about the kingdom. She's the queen now, and she's got to take responsibility for what's going to happen. And Jude has to decide whether she's going to bind Cardan as a snake and rule with a snake at her side, or to take matters into her own hands. And I find it really sad when she talks about always wanting to have some sort of control over Cardan, but now that she's got the chance to have control over him for like eternity, she can't do it, and she doesn't want that for Cardan. Maddox ends up giving Jude an option. He gives her a golden tether, and he says, if you use this on the serpent, then you can have control over him and the kingdom, and you won't have to worry about him, because Carden's a big problem, because when he's a serpent, he leaks poison into the land wherever he goes, and he's an extremely dangerous creature. So Jude has to make a choice. Jude ends up going to Maddox. Okay, fine, I'll do it. So they give her the tether, and they end up taking the armies and going to look for Carden to catch him once and for all. And actually, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at all by this ending. I knew that somehow the author would find some way to get Carden back and everything would be all like happy and sunshine. I don't know whether the author went about the right way to doing it. I think it was too convenient for Jude to just hack the snake's head off and then voila, there's Carden. I think it needed to be explained more at least, so it made a bit more sense. I'm not saying I'm not happy with it. I'm happy that Carden isn't a friggin' snake forever. I really like the way that she describes his transformation. Like, even Carden changes when he turns back from a snake into a human being, and he takes his place on the throne. And Jude and Carden end up punishing all the traitors, and then they go back to the human world and everything's all like happy and butterflies at the end. Okay, but that's the plot for you. Well, some of the plot. Now, I'm going to talk a little about what I thought about it, if I haven't already gone through that already. So, I liked the book, but did I love it? Probably not. It's not up there with my favourites. I think it was a series definitely worth reading, but yeah, it's not my favourite. This is just a personal problem I have with some YA books, but sometimes you're inundated with so many characters and things going on that you have like no idea what's going on, and this happened to me and throughout some of the other books too in this series, and I find it a big problem when I'm assaulted with all these names. I have no idea who they're talking about half the time. But that's just me. Like, other people love it, they love learning about all these different characters, but I don't. So let's talk about the Vivi and Heather subplot. I don't have anything against these characters, they're fine, but I don't really feel anything for them either. I feel like the Vivi and the Heather subplot didn't contribute anything to the story for me. I didn't see their purpose in the story. I really wish that maybe Holly tried to find a way to make them more important to the main plot, maybe to Jude and to Jude's struggles, but that didn't happen for me. Like, there's a part where, I think, is it Vivi or Heather? One of them that goes off and looks up fairy tales to try and find a way to break the curse that Carden is in when he becomes a serpent. They're spouting off all these stories about how, like, all these fairy tales talk about people turning into serpents, and just the way they talk about it, it was just unnecessary. Like, it didn't help. I don't feel like it helped Jude at all. So, like, why? Okay, let's talk about Jude's character. I think that throughout the first book, the first half of the book, I didn't mind her. But it's when we got into the second half of The Cruel Prince is when I really started to dislike Jude as a character. I think it's because of her relentlessness and her willingness to just kill anyone who gets in her way, sort of thing. She had a lot to prove for me to actually like her as a character again. And I feel like in this book, she did it, but she didn't. I don't love her. Like, I like her, I can tolerate her, but do I love Jude? Probably not. But I've got to commend Holly Black on giving Jude great character transformation. I think that through this book, she grew the most than what she's grown in all these other books, and she did it really finely. The same with Carden. I think that Carden was a completely different character in The Cruel Prince, and he does really grow and develop throughout these books, especially at the end. There were times where I really did enjoy the character narration by Jude, and this is one of the scenes. I'll quickly read it. Jude says, "But that brings me to the thing I cannot get past. Even though it's ridiculous, I can't stop the anger that rises in me, lighting a fire in my heart. I am the Queen of Elfame. Even though I'm the Queen in exile, I'm still the Queen. And that means Maddox isn't just trying to take Carden's throne, he's trying to take mine." And I enjoyed this narration like this all throughout the book. Despite some of the flaws in the plot that I didn't really like, the book overall was good. There were times in the book where it was too caught up in world building and all these other characters, and it kind of dragged for me, and I couldn't wait for it to be over. But then once I actually turned the last page, I was sad. I was sad to see these characters go. I could have read another book with these characters easily. Overall, I would give this book a rating of 3 out of 5 stars. It was good, but it wasn't perfect. But, like, if you love fairies and you love all this world building, go for it, read it. If any of you guys have read this book, let me know what you thought in the comments down below. If you're interested in more like writing or book reviews, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching.